We'll get underway in about 2 minutes or so. Hello, my name is Bruce Miller, and I'm with RimTech Consulting. And the topic of today's session is the EDRMS end user experience. For years, we've been talking a lot about EDRMS, but today we get to actually see one working. It's truly the end user experience. So there are two actors in this show here. One is SharePoint and one is the record software. Now, assuming you have a SharePoint as a repository, then that means there are 5 different products on the market that you could choose for record software. One is made by Microsoft and 4 are not. That doesn't matter. This session today, it doesn't matter at all which of the 5 software vendors you use for record keeping. It simply does not matter. But there are two actors in the play, so to speak. One is visible, one is invisible. So what does compliance mean? Well, first of all, the system must be compliant, records compliant, and that means to me that we have every document in SharePoint must comply with the retention schedule. Number two is all the documents are being managed as a record, which means they're immutable, they're assigned a retention rule, and for typically 60% of all records, the event-based triggers are applied. And a trigger is part of a retention rule. The trigger plus the retention period plus an action equals a retention rule. And 60% of all modern records are event-based records. We call them case records. And thirdly, we can do a disposition. That's the end game here. The end game of any EDRMS project is to pull off a disposition, which means let's delete a couple of million records that have reached the end of their life cycle. That's a big and risky step, and it'll never be done unless you have confidence that it's being done properly. And properly and confident means you have to be able to measure and prove that you're at least 85% accurate on all those classifications. So here's a cold, hard reality before we show anything. If I show one document to 10 users at random, yes, at your shop, and I ask them two questions. Is this a record? And where does it belong in the retention schedule? You know what's going to happen, right? I'm going to get up to 10 different answers. And if I ask the same people the same questions about the same document a month later, the answers I get then will be different than the answers I got a month ago. So what's my conclusion here? My conclusion is we can't count on users to hit our target of that 85% classification accuracy rate. So why not just let the users take care of this? Is it really our problem or is it a user problem? Well, we shouldn't, mustn't, and can't have the users manage records for four reasons. Number one, they don't want to. It's just a generally bad idea to make someone do something they don't want to. Number two is they have no consequences if they don't, or if they do it and they do it incorrectly. I've never heard of anybody getting fired because they didn't play ball with records keeping. Number three, this is probably the most common one I hear, is from a user's point of view, oh, this is too much work. It's way too much work. Right. And finally, number four, even if they did do it, they wouldn't do it correctly, consistently enough so that we could hit our 85% disposition or classification accuracy target, which would mean we'd never be able to do a disposition. And in my opinion, 95% or more of all EDRMS projects on the planet cannot do a disposition. Yeah, they are failures. They are failures. So let's take a little bit of a closer look here. It turns out that in a good, normal North American modern EDRMS, the number of records per person per day is 12. Where do we get that? Here's how. 50 inbound emails, 20% of which meet the definition of a record. That totals 10 emails per day, plus two non-emails. What's a non-email? Well, a non-email is a document that exists today that didn't exist yesterday. So what does that mean? That means A, it's not an email, and B, it was either created or downloaded or otherwise acquired. It could have been something that somebody downloaded from a website, received via email, or even generated by a piece of software, but it didn't exist yesterday. So there are typically two of those per user per day. Grand total 12. That's where we get the number 12. So if you have 1,000 users, you're going to see 12,000 records per day flowing into that system. Just do the math accordingly for your project size. Just multiply 12 by the number of users, and that's your daily records flow. It never stops that much every day. So if we did have 1,000 users, then at 12,000 a day, if you, the records manager, were to even consider doing anything with those records at just 1 minute per document, you would need 25 days of work just to examine, fix, correct, or check one single day's worth. One single day, 25 days of work. So clearly that's not going to happen. So my conclusion there is the records manager cannot get involved in classifying records or fixing them. You cannot touch the digital records, period, end of story. Now, there are two schools of thought. One is, well, where are we going to get our compliance from? From end users? That's one thought, which is, yeah, get them to do it. Make them do it. It's their responsibility. They can do it. No reason why they shouldn't. Well, I've given you four already. But anyway, that's one school of thought. And I've seen organizations with written policy that's the responsibility of all the users. The other school of thought says you must be out of your mind. There's no way that's going to work. We're going to have to impose compliance on the end users. If the end users don't like the fact that this document will be kept for 10 years, tough. So, two totally opposite schools of thought. Which one is right? The one on the left, where we impose. We have to impose record keeping on end users. Cannot count on users to do it. Okay? It just doesn't work. I've never seen it work, and I don't expect to in my lifetime. And no, there's no cheat way out here with artificial intelligence, as some people might have you believe. Okay? In fact, if you want to see I have a website, a YouTube a YouTube video on that very topic, which is why artificial intelligence is not going to save us from this. I also have another YouTube video on the why we shouldn't let end users uh, be involved in record keeping. So those are background to this one. Now, any modern EDRMS has three key components. It has a retention schedule. It has a piece of record software. These are the five choices for SharePoint right here. And of course, you have SharePoint. Three products, three different things in an EDRMS. And which one does the user see? Not that, not that, only SharePoint. That's all the user is going to be exposed to. They will never see a retention schedule. They will never see any record keeping software, and they don't need to. So what exactly do we need out of the users? Well, we need them to put documents into the right libraries, okay, into the right place, you could say. Um, we need them to put documents into the correct cases. I'll explain what a case is in a few minutes, but that's critical. And number three is we need them to fill in metadata. And a healthy modern EDRMS has on average about 14 metadata fields. Sounds like a lot, but also true is that the average number or quantity of those 14 that the user has to fill in is only 2.1. That's it, 2.1. Okay. Now, there's a wrinkle in this, which is SharePoint has a huge hole in it, which is users can put documents in all day long and not fill in the metadata, even if it's mandatory. That should never be allowed, but it is, and that's a major problem that all SharePoint sites are going to have, period. Okay? It's got nothing to do with records at all. It's just a SharePoint flaw, in my opinion. So, what's different about a compliant SharePoint from a regular SharePoint, if you can think of it that way? Well, there are some things that are visible and some things that are invisible. There's three things that are visible to a user in a compliant SharePoint. One is cases. What the heck is a case? We'll cover that in a few minutes. But a case is how we handle event-driven records. The second thing that's visible is document versus case metadata fields. In other words, there are two behaviors of metadata, totally different behaviors, two sets of metadata. Another way to look at it is all metadata are either document fields or case fields, and we'll cover that as well. Third is a tool called a library list. Those are the three visible things to a user. So what are the invisible? Well, there's only two. Number one, and these are really not things, these are behaviors or impacts on the user. The first is that the documents are immutable, which means when they put a document in SharePoint, they can't get it back. Well, I shouldn't say they can't get it back out. They can, but they can't delete it or edit it, nor can they edit or delete the metadata associated with it. Now, there's an exception to that rule. Microsoft Purview does allow you to modify the metadata. It shouldn't, but it does. But all the other products prevent that. And the second invisible thing is that documents disappear. Why? Because of disposition. Disposition deletes typically about 95% of all records at the end of their life cycle. So, you could log in on a Monday and on a Friday, the same search comes up with fewer documents because they went away, right? So documents actually go away. And there's nothing users are involved in with that typically. Okay, so let's take a look and I'll show you what this is like. We're going to go into the actual SharePoint a couple of times here. So the first time, I'm just going to give you an overall view of what does it look and feel like. So this is a typical modern EDRMS. Now this is totally uncustomized. This is not in any way doing any custom programming. This is just straight out of the box. No real SharePoint deployment going on here. Okay. So all it is a landing page. Each business unit is a site, and each site has libraries. Each library is a business activity from the retention schedule. Okay, so here we have 9 libraries. Each of these little icons is a library. Now, we all know that 60% of all libraries or business activities are case structured, which we'll get to later. But so 60% typically of these 9 would be case categories or activities. Now, here we're only showing 9 libraries. The typical per business unit is closer to 100. So we would normally see up to 100 of these. You'll notice they're alphabetically sorted. So if we have 1,000 users and let's say 10 business units divided into 10 business units of, let's say 100 people each, then each business unit would be a site, and each site would have typically about 100 of these, typically, okay? Now, the first thing I'm going to show you is this, a library index. This is one of the visible things. This is nothing more than a convenience tool. It's not necessary. It's just a convenience, which is I'm working in the finance department, let's say. I've got my 100 libraries on my landing page. They're in my face every single day because this is where I do all my work. But every now and then, I might question, am I putting this in the right library? Or I might want to wander to another business unit into a different library outside my business unit. So that's what the library index is all about. It's just an alphabetical index of every single library in all of SharePoint, not just in my business unit. Okay. So for each library, we have a link, a single click link that'll take me right to that library. We have a description, which is not native to SharePoint. This is actually coming from the retention schedule, believe it or not. But a user can say, oh, that's what I'm supposed to put in here, right? You can just get further detail on that particular library. And then we have some case naming convention, which I'll explain later. And then the behavior of the library, local, common, or shared. And what does that mean? Local means that this library exists only in this business unit, nowhere else. Common means this library exists in multiple business units. Could be all business units, but more than one. And it's the same library in different business units. Then we have the retention rule, which honestly nobody really cares about. And then a few other privacy related things over here. So that's it. That's the library index. Now let's go into one of these. We're going to go into purchasing card usage and reconciliation. Credit cards. Straightforward. Now, I'm not really going to dwell on giving you a demonstration of how SharePoint works. You can get that off of YouTube. You can play around with SharePoint. That's not my purpose today. My purpose today is only to show you what's relevant for EDRMS behavior and compliance. So here we're in this library, and let's throw a document in. Let's just toss it up there. I'll pick this one. So it's on its way up, and there it is. So I didn't touch a thing. I never touched my keyboard. My hand is on the mouse, but I never touched the keyboard. And you'll notice that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'll scroll horizontally here now. Oh, many, many, many metadata fields. Fair enough. Why? Because that's what finance wants for all their stuff in here. I'm only interested in a few of them, and I'll show you later how to restrict the view to that. But for now, I've got to fill in this field right here. So these are all the other metadata fields. 5 of these metadata fields, by the way, are coming from email. You'll notice that there's email in here. Okay, so yes. Okay, so I typed in my subject, That's all in. And now I close that and I'm done. So I only had to put in one single piece of metadata. Okay. Now, some of this metadata is privacy related and it's all defaulted. So I could change that if I wanted to. Does this contain PII? Well, it defaults to yes. I can change it to no. Does it contain sensitive information? Maybe it does. I'm not going to bother showing you the document, but I can change anything I want here. That's just showing you how SharePoint works. So as you can see, so far, what has my experience been? Well, nothing to do with records. And it never is. It only is the experience is only a SharePoint experience. That's it. Pretty much. Pretty much. So that was a very simple example of a simple non-case category. When I say category, I mean business activity from the retention schedule, which in turn means a library. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our presentation and I need to teach you something in case you don't fully know it, which is case records, because now we're going to go back into SharePoint and we're going to put in a case record, which is a completely different experience, okay? And it's more involved, and you need to know first what case records are. So my apologies, I know some of you know this very well, but it'll only take a few minutes. But it is hugely important. There are two things that bring down most EDRMS projects. One is the failure to hit the 85% minimum classification level, and this one, failure to deploy case records properly. It is either one of those two mistakes is fatal to an EDRMS, and I might say not fixable. Uh, so many projects that I've seen have both mistakes, but this is a big one, case records. So let's assume that you have minimum 60% of your records that are case records. So if we have 1,000 users, 12 records per person per day, that's a flow rate per day of 12,000. So that means that of the 12,000, 60% or 7,200 are going to be case records. And case records have a profound effect on how SharePoint is structured. This is what your retention schedule will look like. Each row in this spreadsheet is a category or business activity, and it has to explicitly specify which ones are case categories and which ones are not. Why? Because all 5 software products have to be told that. Why? Because they use different algorithms to calculate disposition. To the software, every record is either a case or a non-case. More succinctly put, every category or activity in the retention schedule must specify if it's a case or non-case. So with a case, the retention rule that the software will apply is event date plus X years, then delete or transfer, what have you. For the rest, that would be 40% or 4,800 records per day that calculates disposition based on the age. So it takes today's date, subtracts the date of the document, that yields the age, then it compares the age with the retention period. If the age is younger, it passes over. If the age is greater, then it marks it for disposition. So there's no escaping this, whether it's Purview or any of the other 4 products, it does not matter. Every single category in your retention schedule has to specify, am I case or am I not case? Okay. So case records are records about a person, a place, an event, or a thing. And what do they have in common? They all die or end. So really, case records is a behavior, and the behavior is a series of repeated adventures that end, and another adventure begins. Okay? And all the records from each adventure are unique to that adventure and are independent of and different from all other adventures. We call the adventures cases. For example, you might do an audit. Let's say we have a business activity called an audit. Fair enough. Audits happen all the time. In February, we did a health and safety audit. It generated 1,000 records. Fine. That audit came to an end. So we have 1,000 records and an end date for that case, that adventure in February. Meanwhile, in come November, we did a second audit of financial statements. We generated 3,000 records for that one, and that came to an end as well. So that second audit is a second case, a second adventure with its own set of records and its own end date. And we have to keep the two separate from each other. We cannot mix those records up, obviously, right? So pretend for a moment that we have 1,000 contracts, 1,000 employees, and 1,000 projects. Each contract, employee, and project are uh, are case categories, right? So, so that means that we have three categories: contracts, employees, and projects. But we have 1,000 contract cases, 1,000 employee cases, and 1,000 project cases for a total of 3,000. And the retention rule is applied to the case as a whole, not the document as a whole. Now, what about the other 40%? Well, they're not divided into adventures. These are ongoing business activities. There's no rhythm to it. There's no repeated adventure. So it's like a conveyor belt. Retention rule is applied to each document, and they fall off the conveyor belt in X years. Okay? So of the 12,000 per day, 7,200 are case records, 4,800 are not. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky and where you'll see in a moment an impact on the user experience. If we have 1,000 contracts, then we have no choice but to force, let me repeat that word, force the user to choose from a list of 1,000 contracts in order to tell us which contract that document is related to. There is no choice. We have to do that. How do we force them to do that? Well, it doesn't matter how. It could be a pop-up, a drop-down, a flyout. The mechanism doesn't matter. But what matters is the mathematics. Because we can't say this. We can't say, I have a document that I'm putting in a SharePoint about a contract, but it's a big secret as to what contract it's about. I'm not going to tell you. That's kind of crazy, right? So if we have 1,000 employees, then every time I put a document in about an employee, I have to force the user to tell me which employee is this about, right? So again, we have 1,000 employees, 1,000 projects, and 1,000 contracts. That means we have 3,000 to choose from, three lists of 1,000. Now, here's a hypothetical instance right here. Then we'll actually go to the software where this comes together. We have a retention schedule with 253 categories or activities in it. 250 of them are admin categories. 3 of them, namely contracts, employees, and projects, are case categories. Each case has each of those 3 case categories has 1,000 cases in it, right? 1,000 contracts, 1,000 employees, 1,000 projects. Now, we have 12,000 records coming at us every day. Where are they going to go in SharePoint? They have to go somewhere. That's your job, to specify where. Well, turns out that if they're not case records, in other words, 4,800 of the 12,000, guess where they're going? They're going into one of these 250 places, i.e. libraries. Now, we've got 7,200 records out of those 12,000 that are about contracts, employees, or projects. Where are they going to go? Well, there are only 3 libraries, but which case is it about? If it's about a contract, well, we can't mix up the records from contract 7 with the records from contract 12. We need 1,000 places to store that. And that's exactly what we do with SharePoint. We're going to need one library and 1,000 containers or places to put those records. So again, 7,200 records, case records flowing in per day are being aimed at 3,000 places in SharePoint. So the grand total of potential places you have to build in SharePoint is 3,250 in this example. Okay. Now I'm going to show you this live in a minute, but this is how you choose which case. We'll see that in a moment. Okay. Now this is admittedly a tricky diagram to understand. So I'm going to explain it twice. Why am I putting you through this torture? Because if you don't truly understand cases, you're not going to understand what I'm about to show you in the demo, okay? This is hardcore records compliance that I'm showing you here, okay? And it totally involves the user, as you'll see in a moment, all right? Now, here, I'm going to explain this diagram twice. The first time, I'll explain it in records language, and then I'll give you exactly the same explanation, but in SharePoint language. Okay? Don't worry if you don't fully get it, but it does affect the user experience. So here goes. First, records language. We have a category or business activity called contracts. We have 3 contracts: lovely landscaping, safety, security, and tasty catering. We have 7 metadata fields for this category, F1 through F7. The first 5 fields are different. They behave differently than the last 2 fields, F6 and F7. The first 5 fields we call case fields. They are fields that are not entered by the user. They're entered by the records manager once only and only at the time the case is created. The case is a container, but it specifies fields, okay? The value that the records manager enters into these 5 fields is automatically replicated across every document that flows into that case, okay? Why do we do that? Well, because if people are pumping 100 records into that case, why should they have to type the name of the contract 100 times or the name of the vendor 100 times? No need for that. Those fields, case fields, are common to all the documents. They're the same for all the documents. Fields F6 and F7 we call document fields. Those 2 fields are entered by the user, and the value that they enter is unique to the document. That's it. Now I'm going to explain exactly the same thing, but this time I'm going to speak a different language, SharePoint language. Here goes. We have a library called contracts. In it, we have 3 containers or document sets: lovely landscaping, safety, security, and tasty catering. We have 7 columns. Columns F1 through F5 are shared columns. They are created once only by the records manager, and only at the time the container is created. And the value that they type into each of these 5 columns is automatically replicated across every document that flows into that document set. Columns F6 and F7 are non-shared columns, and the user enters those 2 fields for each document, and the values they put into those 2 fields are unique to each document they put in that document set. And that's it. Those are the 2 explanations. Now, the average number of metadata fields or columns in a healthy, normal, modern EDRMS is 14, which is great. But even better is that the users only have to enter 2.1 of those on average statistically. How the heck is that even possible? Because of this. and because some fields are defaulted. So good news, the user doesn't have to do a lot of work here. Okay, so let's go back and let's do something totally different now in SharePoint. What we're going to do now is we're going to put a document into this library, competitive procurement. The difference is that now this is a case library. It has a totally different behavior. Okay, so again, we're in competitive procurement. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 containers, each representing a case, because each competitive procurement is an adventure that generates hundreds, and maybe even thousands of records, especially if you include email, which we should, and we can't mix them up. The records for the bucket truck, that $350,000 bucket truck we bought, have nothing to do with the landscaping services contract that we bid. Okay? So what we're going to do here now is we're going to go into the bucket truck and we're going to put a record in there. We're going to upload a document into bucket truck. These are the records in there so far. Okay, let's put one in. So it's on its way. And there it is. Again, I didn't touch a thing yet. So you can see a couple things here. Number one is, you see that red symbol? That says problem, warning. There's some mandatory fields that are missing required information. In other words, missing mandatory metadata. Shame on SharePoint for allowing that to happen, but what can we do? It doesn't matter. Let's just go fill them in. Now there are 3 or 4 different ways. Oops, I'm sorry, I just opened the document unwittingly. So there are 3 or 4 different ways we can fill in metadata on the screen. We can do it horizontally, vertically. I'm not here to show you how to use SharePoint. That's not my goal. Again, my goal is to show you how the record keeping compliance affects the users. So subject keywords is mandatory. So let's type that in. All right. And there's another one hiding down there. It is right here, the vehicle. This is a managed metadata field. So I have to choose from a list. And I have the world's simplest list here. I only have one, which is a fire truck. Anyway, whatever it is. So now I have completed my 2 mandatory fields. So I can shut this down. Now I don't have the warning sign there anymore. Okay? No more warning signs. I have some left over from some previous documents. This is our document down here at the bottom. Now, what I wanted to introduce you to was case fields versus, or columns, case columns versus document columns. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to back up to the library here for a moment where it's easier to see this. Now, I'm assuming you all know SharePoint and that you can construct views. These little rounded icons, each of these is a view. So I've created a view called Bruce, which is just the document fields that I can enter. I cannot enter the case fields, nor must I be allowed to, because they're the same. They're entered once, only at the time of case creation, and they're done, right? This is for the case columns. I'll show you. Notice if you go from left to right here, procurement is a very sophisticated business. Look at all this data. Oh my gosh, I don't even know what half of it means. I'm just a user here. I'm participating in the bucket truck adventure, but I'm not from procurement. I'm not interested in all that other stuff. So I'm going to have my own view called Bruce. And there it is. Notice no more horizontal scrolling left to right. I'm only seeing the columns that I can enter, and that I'm interested in, okay? But if I wanted to see the case columns for whatever reason, remember, these are the orange fields on top of that diagram I just showed you. Now I'm seeing all these sophisticated uh, procurement-related data that went into the case, not on, right? So I didn't enter any of this stuff, but I can search and filter on all of it, right? These columns, again, are case columns that the user cannot, must not touch, right? And here is all the columns if I want that view. And again, a lot of left-right scrolling, which is not a good thing, right? So I tend to pretty much ignore case columns. If I'm interested, I'll take a look at them. But basically, I'm not going to bother with them, okay? So I just wanted to show you that this is really, really important. This is how to deal with case records. So 60% of all your libraries will be structured this way. Now, let's talk about the 85% classification accuracy rate for a minute because this is critical. We need the users to do two things. Number one, put documents in the right places. Number two is fill in the metadata. That's going to be organizational rigor only. Let's not talk about that. But the first one, yeah, putting them in the right places. In behind each one of these libraries, notice I never said container. In behind every library is an automatic rule that the record software is applying, a retention rule, right? So all the user has to do is simply put documents in the right places and it gets the right rule. It's almost impossible to put it in the wrong library because the metadata is so different. Imagine if I was putting my document related to, let's say, expense reports into, let's say, fleet vehicle maintenance. Well, I would see metadata that sounded like uh, vehicle number, date in, date out, work order number, technician name. Why would I push through all that data? I wouldn't. So the odds that someone puts something in the wrong library is, for all intents and purposes, zero. Okay? Because the metadata is wildly different. But here, the metadata is identical on each case. So how is it possible that I can misclassify something? There's only one way, which is I put it in the wrong case because each case has the identically same metadata because it's the same library, the same activity, right? If it's in the wrong case, it's misclassified and it contributes to your maximum 15% error rate. But if I am putting 15% of my documents in the wrong place, how long before somebody notices that, right? If I'm, as a ridiculous example, but if I'm in HR and I'm assigning raises to people and I put them in the wrong places, the wrong people get the wrong raises, how long before somebody catches that, right? So it's very unlikely that people will do their job incorrectly 15% of the time. If they do, then it's not a records failure. It's I'm not doing my job properly failure. And that's likely going to be discovered and hopefully corrected. So if it's structured properly like this, you should be very, very confident in your 85%. You still have to measure it every day. And yes, there's another YouTube video on how to measure it and how to prove that you're compliant. Very important. But that's about it. So uh, the only real impact on the user that's visible are these cases. And if they ever go to delete a document, it's just not going to work. It's going to say, sorry, this is a record. You cannot delete it. Okay. All right. And that's it. So let me go back to the presentation and wrap it up. So this is my conclusion. The EDRMS experience is really not an EDRMS experience. It's a SharePoint experience. When you do your training, what are you training them on? SharePoint, and how to use it. Telling them that they won't be able to delete a document is nothing more than a footnote, really. But what you do have to teach them is case records because they have to understand that if you are putting in something about a contract, you have to specify which contract. And that's how we did it, right? We looked at document sets. Yes, there can be 10,000 document sets there. That's perfectly normal. I know of real live sites that do it. And it's not hard to work with. It's really not. And email, well, that's another story. 4/5 of all modern digital records are emails. 4/5. Are you putting your emails into SharePoint? If not, then you certainly should. Allow me to back up a minute if I may here, and we'll go back into this. You might not notice it now, but there are 5 columns in here that came from email. I'll show them to you. Pretty sure they're for, yes, this is it right here. Let's see if I can find them. Procurement. Okay, I'll show you where to find them. I have another library that I'm going to go to, which is set up to receive email. When you are set up to receive email, and every EDRMS should be, then that means you're going to have 5 extra columns. Sounds like a lot. It is a lot. But when you're using modern email integration software, you're just dragging and dropping email in Outlook over a library in SharePoint without leaving Outlook. And all 5 fields, that's the 2 from subject, CC, whatever, are automatically filled in and populated for you. Here's an example right here. We got 1, 2, 3, 3 emails have been filed in this library. So if I take a look at the metadata, then you'll see the 5. And I am not seeing it because of my view. So let's go into here, and we need a different view so I can show you this right here. Okay, I'm still not seeing it. Not totally sure why. Oh, sorry. Here they go. I got them in a view. That's why. I created the view just to show those fields. So here they are here. The to title, sender received from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is there another one? Nope, 5. So there were 5, the to title, sender received, and from. Those are automatically populated, right? So now you can do searching and filtering based on those fields, which is extremely useful, right? You can filter by the sender name. I want only this sender here. But assuming that you are managing 4/5 of your records, that means you are integrating SharePoint with Outlook, and that means you will have these 5 extra columns, and that's an impact on the user. Obviously, it's a good impact, very good impact. We have to hit the 85%. We're not here to talk about that today, but I encourage you to look at a YouTube video that I have that shows how to measure it and how to prove it. And there's only 2 impacts: immutability, which means they cannot delete anything, and documents eventually will disappear. It could take 5 years for the first one to disappear, but they will start to disappear. And that is it. Are there any questions? I'll hang around a bit in case there are any questions. You can either put it in the chat if you wish, or just speak up. Great. Awesome. If there are no questions, well, thank you sincerely for taking time out of your day. I know that that's asking a lot. And you'll get an email from me tomorrow with a link to download the recording. And I totally encourage you to share it with your colleagues by all means. There's just not enough EDRMS know-how out there. All right. Again, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.